Did people send in questions or no?
Oh, we're going to do that probably at the end if anybody has any
Oh,
questions.
okay.
Yeah. So welcome
Yeah.
everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to Survivor Space and today's wonderful Survivor Circle. I've been looking forward to this one. So pleased to welcome Kiesa and Valerie today. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get into the good stuff. So this session is being recorded. So if you need to step away for your self-care or your schedule, feel free to do that. The recording will be available on Zero Abuse Project's YouTube channel and on the Survivor Space website after the session today. So you can go back and watch it again. You can share it with others. So all the folks who are joining us today, you are not able to share your video or your audio, which is just for your privacy, for your safety. But we do encourage you to ask questions or comment via the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Click on the chat. You have the option of sending a message out to everyone, which includes all of us and the folks who are attending, or you can just type in a message to me, Kiesa, and Valerie. So please feel free to type in questions or comments as we go along. We encourage that. Want to give a quick shout out to our funders. So Survivor Space is funded by a grant through the Office for Victims of Crime, which also supports our survivor circles. So we are grateful for that funding. And I realize I didn't introduce myself. I'm Becky Perkins, a survivor support specialist with Zero Abuse Project. I have this checklist I go through every time, and you'd think I would remember it, but I don't. So just makes it, spicy, and you don't know what to expect each time, right? So, but welcome everyone. We're so glad you're here. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kiesa, who will get us started. Welcome.
Oh, thank you very much, Becky. And I love the spice you bring to each one of these. It's just wonderful to me. I appreciate you so much. And today, I'm really glad everybody's here. And today we're going to be talking with Valerie Naiman, and she is the author of Mystic Masquerade, An Adoptee's Search for Truth. And this is her book. And I thought I was going to read a chapter and then go to sleep. I stayed up all night reading it, even though I'd heard the audio. It was absolutely enchanting and fascinating in a way that I cannot even begin to describe to you. And I'm harsh on books. I am, but not this one. Valerie, part of it was that Valerie has led a very, very exciting and meaningful life. She has been one of the founders of Earthaven Ecovillage in Black Mountain, North Carolina, which is an eco-village that has gone thriving for, I think it's almost 30 years now, 25 years at least. She also has translated the works of for the man she calls Gurudev in her book. And she spent at least 11 years in the book, it says, in India, and went all over the world. She started the first costume shop in Asheville. She's a naturalist, and she can do yoga. I mean, she's just amazing, an amazing human being. And yet, through it all, there's been this search for identity, this search for who am I? What does my life mean? And this book takes you through every bit of it. It is so exciting. That's the thing that got me. Now, Valerie, I just gave you a big introduction, but one of the things you say is life is either a daring adventure or nothing. You're quoting Helen Keller in your book. And I was thinking, what led you to create such a daring adventure with your life? You have not, you have not led a dull life.
Um, I don't know. It just happened. I've always been creative. I think I was born on the longest day of the year, being a Gemini, and I typically am an extremist, and I have to follow my dreams and take them to the result, no matter what it is. And so that's what I've always done. I've always loved grand landscapes. I don't typically do something small projects, and I have lots of grand landscapes piled up behind me waiting on me too. I'm a project oriented, and a lot of that has to do with, not knowing who I am. It's like the adventure was, well, where do I come from? I didn't know who I was. I got I'll read just the first chapter, not chapter, I'll read just the intro, and that'll explain what started all of this. So
Yeah.
except for a few enlightened beings, we all lose our identity when birthed into the world. Having mine erased twice before I was 7 led me on a mysterious lifelong journey. My search went beyond discovering who I am into a deeper exploration of who we all are and where we came from. We each play a part in this drama of life with our various masks and costumes. Eventually, self-inquiry arises and we ask, who am I? And what's the mission, purpose in my life? Unveiling that truth is a mystical masquerade that takes an inquisitive mind that thinks beyond the norm. So I invite the readers to travel with me through uncharted terrain. And I hope that my book does inspire people, whether they're an adoptee or not, because the search was, in the end, when I found out I was adopted and I wasn't blood family of all these people.
That's right. And you quote Rene Descartes, if you would be a real seeker of truth, it is necessary at least once in your life you doubt, as far as possible, all things. And if you didn't
True.
discover you were an adoptee until you were a little older. And on page 42, you say, children have the right to know the truth, the right to understand their heritage, the right to their biological medical information and not to be lied to. Sealed records, fabrications, and lies lead to adversity. How did that play itself out? How did you discover you were an adoptee? I know from reading the book, but would you talk a little bit about that discovery and how it affected you and your definition of who you are?
Well, when I was about 7, my brother blurted out in anger that we don't belong here. They're not our parents. I said, what are you talking about? And I thought he was just being mean. And I went to my parents and they were like, zip. Why would you ask anything like that? Of course. So they never admitted it. And, I let it go. I thought my brother was just being mean, but it wasn't until my parents actually passed away that I found out. And I found my documents. So that was, years and years and years. But somewhere in the back of my mind was like, this doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. I'm the only blonde-haired, blue-eyed in the entire family. My parents were like 50s when they adopted me. I never fit in. And so what I did is try on different characters. I was, my mother was a stage mother, my adopted mother. And so she would, I had all kinds of classes to learn baton, acrobatics, piano. They even sent me to charm school, which did not work. But
Well, you're charming, Valerie. I give you that.
no,
So
I
it worked to that extent.
terrible. You had a big room with all these mirrors and you're supposed to walk in a certain way. No, that was not me. But I wasn't shy at all. And so I performed. I became an entertainer. And from being an entertainer, I became an actress. From that, I had the opportunity to try on so many different characters. And it was like I'd get so deep into a character that I had a hard time finding my way back because I didn't know where back was. So
To find your way back home or back to yourself.
yeah,
Not just back home, but
what
back to
is
that home in your
myself?
heart.
Correct. I still remember all these lines from shows I was in. And
Uh-huh. And you are a very successful costume designer. Do you think, I mean, I'll never forget your bee costume.
Uh, uh,
Oh, I mean, you're just really, really great at it. Do you think that comes from wanting to try on different selves?
well, yes. And, I ended up, acting on Broadway. And, then I went back to school and I realized everybody wants to be an actress. So what can I do that I'm actually going to support myself financially with? And by the time I got out of undergrad school, I had some scholarships offered, in acting, directing,
Mhm.
costuming. I thought, who in the world goes and gets their master's in costume design? No one. I'm going to do it because I've always known that the niche is where it is. If you can find a niche and get in there, then you're going to be successful pretty much, I think. So I got into costumes, and then from there I became a costume designer for film and television, and the whole thing led until I gave that whole life up. It's like, what am I doing with my life? Am I doing anything worthwhile? Being a costumer? I don't know. And all these commercials, you see all the fake stuff they put out there. And I was asked to sign affidavits for some costumes I made for a detergent commercial, right?
Mhm.
And so I had to have duplicates, and they had put down the soil, and the person's running through the trail and falls in, and it had to clean up, right? It did not clean up, and they wanted me to sign an affidavit that said it did. And I said, I'm not doing it.
Oh, so you had a moment where you had to question what is the deeper meaning. But
Right.
it sounds like the arts have always been a part of your life, that's always been your refuge.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. It's like that's where I thrive is in art. And now it's morphed into being a writer. Although
Mhm.
I've written 3 books before this, it wasn't this one is like my manifesto. So the other,
Well,
you know,
we're
I
jumping ahead. We're going to go back because I really want to explore your story of discovery and finding out about your mother and all of that. But since you went there, I want to just mention deep selfology.
oh yeah.
You've got a chapter in here on deep selfology, and it's just amazing. And you talk about at the end too about how the writing has helped you to process and transform by going deep into a different part of your self-study. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, writing has always been kind of, if I didn't have the years of journals that I've written, I have a giant basket over here. I'm in my writing room, my sunroom. And if I didn't have those, there's no way I'd remember if I took ayahuasca before, or if I went to live with the Maori tribe after that. When did all this happen? And so I'm so grateful. If anybody out there is writing journals, keep them, put them
Mhm.
somewhere or digitalize them because they may come in really handy. And I think that the writing itself was one of the most healing things for me is writing this story because it was a recapitulation of my life. It's a memoir. And to
Mhm.
be able to put it all together and to see, oh my God, that's how all that happened. I ended up going from costumings into sacred garments and then doing journeys and bringing an Incan Shasky to meet with the Hopi elders. And then from there it was, I had a vision, and that vision ended up establishing the first eco village of North America called Earthaven Ecovillage, which is in still existence. That was started in 1990. I had the vision. Let's see, I was going somewhere with this. Now I forgot
What,
where my
what
train.
you, well, I'll take you back to where I was going.
Okay.
We can keep circling back because you said, the more I wrote, the more I understood how my experiences with Gurudev tied into my adoption, and I've been writing ever since. Then you said, for years I called myself an oncologist and figured that the study of beingness applies to us all, right? Writing turned me on to studying myself in a new way. I decided my new role was that of a selfologist. I looked it up in the dictionary and was surprised to find out it's not a word, and there are no origins for it. Well, guess what? It's a word now. I didn't know where I came from, so that suited me fine. And I called my writing practice deep selfology.
Mhm,
Deep
mhm.
self. I love that I didn't know that you had used your journals to remember all the things and the sequences and so on. And what a valuable use of that. I like going back and reading my old journals. Got one, got one that actually says, "Oh no, I'm 16. I'm too old to be a child star.
Ah, that's great.
Doors are beginning, doors are beginning to close." And it's amazing when you see the ways that you thought and the ways that you changed. And you also remember so vividly what happened in a different way when you write to yourself. But you said also that there were a lot of trust issues that came from finding out that you'd been adopted and not being told the truth. You said your issues revolved around trust, and the initial separation wound shattered that sense of trust, made it difficult for adoptees to make sense of life. And that sort of made me feel sad because you're so trustworthy in and of yourself. Your word really is your bond. If you say you're going to do something, you do it, and you do it expansively. So that you would have trust issues, that's sad. But I could see
Yeah.
finding out that no one had told you this essential truth about your life could have made a profound impact. And I could not figure out for the life of me why they hadn't told you. I could not figure it out.
Shame. It's shame, and there's so many issues involved with the whole entire triad. It's not just the adoptee that's affected, but it's the birth parents and the
Mhm.
adopted parents. And most of the adopted parents are told a narrative that, oh, you got a clean slate here. That is so far from the truth. It's the trust issues that develop are because you've been lied to, because things have been kept from you. And that's true for most all adoptees. Here, I'll read
Mhm.
just the first paragraph in here, and that'll kind of like kick it off of
Yes.
what was happening is I was taken from my mother's womb at birth, never to see her again. It's like unheld. I entered a
Mhm.
frigid black hole with no compass, and as an infant, there was no way to grasp what had happened. Life catapulted me into an abyss of mystery that took decades to unravel. It's like I'm going to skip some here, but I'm looking down. From an early age, seeking the truth became my modus vivendi. I lost myself many times along the way, and that was because I was in all these different characters. Um,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
today I've emerged with an understanding of my life and the initial birth trauma. In adoptee land, some call it coming out of the fog. For
No.
others, we call it coming into a state of soul awareness. So there's
Mhm.
this thing, and it's a thing right now. I'm in an adoptee army, and there was a documentary that's been put out called Reckoning with the Primal Wound. Primal wound is when an infant's taken from their mother. Think about it. You don't even take a dog from its mother for a minimum of 2 months. And yet you'll take an infant and pretty much sell that infant.
That was one of the things that you said in your book that just it chilled my heart. I think you used the term black market baby,
Oh,
you
yeah,
know, and that was your heritage
right.
in a sense. That was part of who you were. And yet you grew up to found Earthaven. You grew up to be the right-hand person for a saint in India. You translated all of his works into English. You went with him all over, I mean, to the jungles of Brazil and on those wonderful ceremonies. And as an individual, you've done so much traveling. And yet, when you put it that way, I've always thought of you as a spiritual seeker. And it almost seems like the seeking was beyond that. And yet, through the seeking, there was a constant thread of giving yourself, bringing joy. Gurudev called you his entertainer, you
Yeah.
know, and 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 that's to me, that's so wonderful. So you really did always transform it into something generous, generous for other people. The
Love
parties at the the parties at the White Owl at Earthaven are still legendary. I mean,
Wow.
you just have always given and created and been that person other people could rely on. And yet there was this doubt in your heart. Yeah. When did you decide to go look for your birth mother?
After my parents passed away, I thought, well, maybe I can find some information. And I did. I found my adoption decree. And I thought, wow, I've got something to go by. It listed it listed me as infant Hansen. I thought, oh yeah, I'm Dutch. No wonder my parents used to give me little Dutch shoes and stuff. Well, that didn't turn out to be the case at all. It wasn't even a real name. There's so many lies, involved in that, which, just keeps ripping away your trust items. And so the whole thing about the trust and the trauma of an adoptee is, it's hardly fathomable for people to understand. Adoptees have the highest, are the group of the highest ratings of suicide.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I didn't even know that until, later when I was writing my book and stuff, and I was looking back up some of the research that I'd done and trying to find my birth parents. I ended up connecting to different groups and learning all of that. I had no idea, because a majority of adoptees they want to please, which is some of the things you've said that have been, service oriented, is probably me uh, uh, trying to find my own self-worth. And that happens for a lot of adoptees because of the trauma and because the fog hasn't been lifted yet. And they have no idea really what the reason is that they're either such a go-getter, or on the other side, which is even more adoptees, is I'm not loved. I was given
Mhm.
away. I'm not
Oh,
worthy. I'm not whatever. I'm not good enough. And I went the route of I'm going to prove that
mhm,
I'm worthy without knowing
mhm,
what I was doing. I mean,
mhm,
I went so far as to spend 14 of my years of life in ex executing the vision that turned out to be Earthaven Ecovillage, which is world known now. I don't live there, but I did 14 years of that. And
That's a
finally,
lot. That's a
I
lot.
realized that, oh my God, in the end, I realized I really tried to
Mhm,
create subconsciously a family that would never leave me.
mhm.
That was
By
big.
creating Earth Haven, you
Yes.
created a family. And it's run as well, now it's different, but when it was founded, it was run as a coordinating collective, wasn't it? Where everyone had to agree and there
Oh,
was
it's
really a
always been
sense of,
that way. I set it up. So I did so much research in the 4 years before we opened the gates of the land that we found. Actually, I'm living in the way station of the property that we got before we bought that land. It's 6 acres in Asheville, and I'm happy to be here. It's beautiful. I got goats, chickens, honeybees, and
one thing that occurs to me in this conversation is that the council hall at Earth Haven has the feel of a womb. Have you ever
well,
noticed that? Do you think that was intentional? You would know if that was it. It really feels like a womb, like it's a container, a warm and healing container. It's
right.
shaped beautifully. And was that, do you think that was a subconscious creation, or was that like, we are
Um,
going to make
it
this?
was conscious. There was, I have these dreams or visions that come through a lot. And so what I saw was looking up like as a bird flying over and looking down And the imprint of what I ended up building was a bird landing with its wings pulled in. And so I built the White Owl Lodge, and there's not a 90-degree angle in the building. And I was showing another member, and he pulled out something he had as a vision, and he showed almost the identical thing, and he helped me build that. And he also was, we worked with creating this design and making it also into the council hall. Although the council hall doesn't have the bird beak coming out, it still is round. And I was totally into the Mayan stuff back then, so is he. So it's based on, there's 13 pillars for the 13 months, Mayan months, and we did this intricate wood design on the floor and put in moldavite and all kinds of stones in there to radiate some otherworldly energy. And yeah, that was like a womb. It was it encompassed you. And we built it big enough that, 30 people, 30 feet across was the largest area where you could have a circle and people could really see each other's eyes. And so we did it that way. And it was a group effort in getting that built. But yeah, Earthaven, oh, there was so much involved in doing Earthaven. It wasn't easy at all.
No, I couldn't have been. Oh, just agreeing with all those people. But where was that in your adoption journey to find your mother? Where, with the
Um,
creation of Earthaven and the journey? How did the coalesce?
I had already started looking, but I didn't get anywhere at that time at all. I got my first digital brain, and that's back when we had, like floppy disk, and most people don't even know what those are. Somebody called me yesterday from Earthaven asking something. I said, I think I've got it on floppy disk in my organized chaos. I'll go look for it. But
I remember.
yeah, my mother went way before that. So her mother went when my mother went when I was 20. Oh, geez, I have to look at my book and everything to find out my years of everything. I think that was 70. I was like 20, 22, 23, 20, something like that. And then her dying wish, my adopted mother, was to see me settle down, get married. So I did that kind of
Kind of, kind of.
I never turned the papers, and there's a story about it in the book. Yeah,
Yeah, a very, very good story, I might add. A very good story.
we sailed off into the sunset. Well,
Literally,
they thought that,
literally.
they'd be grandparents soon, and yeah, and then she passed right after that. But she was so happy with that situation. Some of the things we'll do, oh my God. So yeah, but going back to the trauma of the whole thing, it's like for adoptees, the adoptees are the ones with the most intense trauma, and they have
Yeah,
no way of knowing what's going on. And
I
the,
don't know why.
and the birth parents, you know, there's the relinquishment, there's the attachment, there's the shame, there's it's horrible for birth parents. Most of them, wasn't for my mother, but there's all of those things going on for them. And then of course the adopted parents, they have all kinds of shame around maybe not being able to have children, or having to hide, go somewhere and come back with their child.
Back
Whatever,
then. Yes.
open adoptions are so much better. Closed adoptions with all the lies and legalities are terrible. Adoption is like a multi-billion-dollar business, and there's so much advertising put out of, to adopt a child, what a wonderful thing you're doing, you're saving, you're the savior, and it's, oh my God, And the only victim is really the child, because
So it's important to be open.
they don't
That's
have
what,
emotional maturity, they don't have intelligence to know what's going on. And so it affects them all their life. And if they're lied to, they have no clue. And if they're never given counseling, then what you gonna do? A lot of commit suicide. And that
oh,
is
that's so sad.
sad.
It's so sad. And some of them figure it out, heal that primal wound. I mean, you are always, I feel your life has been a process of healing that primal wound. And your success is out there. I mean, there's no questioning your success. So it's possible and you do it, but it's not easy. And it sounds like there's a cost. There's a real cost. And I wondered if you'd be willing to talk about meeting your mother and what that was like
Oh, you're
for
giving
you.
away a spoiler on my
But if
book.
you don't want to, if you don't want to spoil, if you think that's a spoiler,
Oh,
you
no,
don't
no,
have
no,
to.
I'll share for sure.
Okay,
Because
because it's up to you. Because there's a
three,
lot of other things in this book, but
you know,
but that.
I worked so hard
Mhm,
trying to find out who I was. You know, think
mhm.
about it. Just to even get your own birth certificate. Mine was finagling a passport. I had to have a birth certificate. I, to get that was crazy. I mean, adoptees pay money for all this kind of stuff. And then a lot of them end up having to go to counseling. They got to pay for that. And it's like, holy. And they're the only ones that are supposed to be grateful, right?
Oh,
Oh,
you said that.
so
That
lucky.
stopped me cold. You said in the book that the adoptees were the only people who are supposed to be grateful for the trauma.
Right.
And that I was like, what? It just threw me for a loop. I thought never even thought of that before,
It's such a
ever.
trigger when people say to adoptees, oh, but you have such good parents. Oh, but you had such a great, they say all kinds of stupid stuff that has,
Mhm.
they have no idea how it triggers you. And
Yes, yeah.
it's just because of the narrative, the multi-million-dollar advertisement of what a wonderful thing it is to save a child. It's
Mhm.
just, it's awful. And of course, then there's the all the money involved.
And so the damage for you was the lying to you about who you were. You said in your book, growing up, I played roles to appease my adoptive family. As most adoptees know, growing up in a family that doesn't walk and talk like you can make you feel out of place, and you end up developing coping strategies to deal with the uncomfortable feelings. You know, that I'm so special because I was chosen theme, and most of us don't even know we're doing it. And adoptee parents also begin to play roles. And then you talk about this in terms of, and your discussion is in the discussion of Gurudev. You traveled with, as you say, I traveled with Gurudev through Europe, Singapore, Dubai, New Zealand, South America, the USA, and India. Speaking Hindi, Spanish, and English was a big plus. It was a rare privilege to assist him, but also highly demanding. As the only one traveling with Gurudev, I was busier than ever. And on one journey, we went to New Zealand, where Gurudev presided over and blessed the opening of a new Sikh temple. And flying into Auckland brought on flashbacks of the Taranaki Maori tribe. And it was just interesting to me how many different ways you circled back to trauma and resolved it with Gurudev. It seems like that was, I mean, I don't know if he was a spiritual father, I think is what you called him. How did that relationship help you heal your life?
Oh, I went for
A big question. Yeah.
I had at Earthaven. I had been living there and done all this stuff at Earthaven, and I was helping another person establish what's called the Peace Chamber, which was a vision of beautiful painted arrow, a Pueblo Ute Indian, and then we would bring in to the Earth Center different indigenous elders to share their knowledge and have workshops and retreats, So my Gurudev was speaking at the United Nations at the World Peace Conference, and we were able to get him to come to Asheville, where I'm living now, and had a retreat. And that's where I met him. And while he was there, it's like all these synchronicities began to happen. And that's how I live my life. It's like I finally figured out all I have to do is watch what the universe shows me and get out of my way and follow that. And so that took a lot of faith to do that. It's an empty-handed leap into the void, really. And so all these synchronicities kept happening. And I said, well, who is this guy in an orange dress that all this stuff is happening? And it's like, I was blown away by the synchronicities. And then on his last day, I waited till last to say my goodbyes because I was a co-host. And then he looks at me and he goes, you come to India. And I thought, yeah. So over the next week, I met a girl named Sari. Somebody was talking about India. It was over and over and over. That's what I call the living language. And so I ended up getting a ticket. I said, all right, I'm going. And it was quite amazing. I got a ticket to go for 2 weeks, closed my place up at Earthaven, went there. And everybody had told me how sick they got in India. And I'm like, oh, I got this. I'm only going to eat, things I can peel. I'll be fine. So I go and he's on the rooftop giving a satsang, and I kind of hid myself so nobody would see me and got in line. And then I saw he was handing a piece of fruit to everybody, and I get up and I'm next, and I pull my head thing down, and he looks at me, and he has like an apple in his hand, or I forgot what it was actually, but he put it down and picked up a whole thing of bananas, and he gave it to me. And I'm like, everybody else was only getting one. Let's see. So I took one off, handed it back. He laughed and laughed and handed the whole thing back to me. And it continued from there. It was in 2 weeks, I threw away my return ticket. I had no idea. I stayed 11 years. And
Wow, how spontaneous to
yeah,
plan to be there 2 weeks and stay 11 years is amazing.
it was. And then I'd have to renew my visa every 6 months. And then I became his assistant, and we traveled all over the world because nobody else spoke good enough English. And I learned Hindi. He taught me Hindi and Sanskrit, and I taught him better English. And he was my spiritual father, no doubt. And I thought, wow. And at one point, it's like this whole thing. I'm thinking, well, all this magic is happening here. I bet he can help me find out where I came from, right?
Yes.
I had different readings and went to some Vedic astrologers and just so much stuff. And they all told me I'd lived in India before, and that I was abandoned in the street in India, and I just a lot of weird stories. Of course, I had no way to verify this.
You
And
knocked on every door looking for
yes,
this.
I
Yeah.
did. I really
Wouldn't give.
did.
Mhm.
But he was so supportive of me and my work and what I did. And I thought the best thing I could do with my life was to support this magical being. And so I did. And little did I know I'd be there 11 years, but it happened. And then it was just like a series of occurrences that happened. It was like, okay, I'm done. Passed my last tat, and that's good. And he gave satsangs twice a day or more, and he would teach me things like Hindi songs, and then he taught me a song his teacher had taught him, and we translated it, and I sang it in English, and it translates as What we experience in this world, dear friends, is created in our minds. The whole world is but a dream projected by our mind's eyes, and songs like that. And what he taught was that attachments are the highest wall to be able to open up to enlightenment. And so I thought, wow, so I've never been able to bond with anybody. I've never been able to have deep relationships. I'll fly at just the thought of anybody leaving me. And a lot of adoptees have this issue. It's that, oh, the thought of being in relationship. No, let's don't do that. A lot of adoptees don't have children either that I
Oh,
did.
Valerie, I have to tell you, once a man said he wanted a relationship, and I said, could we just have a relation canoe or a relation kayak? A
Right,
ship is
that's
so
good,
big.
good. Yeah, that's why they call it
That's part of the fun.
relationship. You
Yeah,
have to re-relate every time. I want an relationship, not a re-relationship.
a
So
relationship. I've never heard that term, but I like it. And I understand what you mean. It was a hardship to figure out who you were and how you could fit with someone. That was like a big challenge. So you went to all these places with that continual inner challenge. What got to me about Gurudev, I was honored to meet him. Honored to meet him. What got to me was how utterly humble and ordinary. Here's this man who's a saint that millions of people revere, and he's just as sweet and I don't even know how to describe it. There's that story he told about coming into the big city, and he was going to be the honored guest in the city, and they had posters up and all this kind of banners and this and that. And he was very tired, and he walked first with his entourage behind him. He walked first into this gorgeous hotel place where he's staying. And the guards said, "Get out of here. We have a famous man coming. Get out of here. You're messing the place up." And he was like, because he was an honored guest there. And then one of his assistants came up and said, "Do you know who you're talking to?" And they're like, and he pointed at the big banner. Yeah, this is that man. But Gurudev hadn't said a word.
no, he
He
wouldn't.
hadn't said a word. He just he let the guards be utterly awful to him, and he didn't stop loving them. And someone else said, and they were completely mortified. I do not know if they kept their jobs, but he didn't ostentatiously announce himself
Never,
in any
never.
way, shape, or
He's
form.
so humble. He has so many names. Yug, Purish, blah, 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 blah. He's the head of an acharya. He's
And
uh
the kindness. I'm so glad that you had and still have those years of kindness for you, because I think it must have really helped heal that primal wound to have that level of kindness in your life day in and day out for that time period. But then you came back here and you found who you were in a new way. And do you think it was that time there that led you to be able to do this? I mean, what's the
uh,
connection?
uh, when I came back from India, it's it's another crazy story. But anyway, I was unpacking stuff, and I had done all this work prior to going to India in the search. I'd been to psychics all over, this kind of thing. I'd had detectives.
Everything.
I'd had DNA test. I got nowhere, and so when I was unpacking, and there was, I made a big. I still have it in the other room. It's a big thing of India and the world. And I marked where we'd been and whatever. And then I marked the flights. And I thought, wow. And this CD fell on the floor. I had a pile of CDs, and it was the one of the recordings of a psychic that I'd had years earlier. And unbelievable. It all flashed back together because she had told me I would meet this man from a foreign country in America, and I'd travel the world with him, and I would go in a triangle X amount of times. And I looked at that and I thought, oh my God, that's who she was speaking about. It's like the magic and all the mystical things that happen really supported my journey in such an amazing way that I believe that, if we just are able to let it go of our normal thinking, that we can allow the divine energies to move through us. That's the ticket. But most of us, like me, have too big of an ego to let that happen. We're afraid something's controlling us, but actually, it's the opposite. It's like we
It's,
don't need to be controlling divine nature. Of course, we have projects. Of course, we have things to do, but we need to pay attention and listen. And that was one of the most healing things for me, is knowing that I just had to get out of my way. I
you know,
didn't.
it's you're making me think of a Bible verse. It means a lot to me that just says, don't rely, I'm going to misquote it, but it's going to say, don't rely on your own understanding. There's
Right.
something bigger. There's God. Don't rely on your own understanding. There, and it's like sometimes you have to trust that inner intuition to find things right. And I
You
keep
have to
being,
go beyond
um,
the normal thinking.
and yeah, and beyond this, what's for lunch thinking, you know, and really accept that we are far more beautiful than we ever imagined, and far more capable than we ever imagined, you know. And it just seems to me that that's a really true universal truth. And we forget it when we're sad or depressed or scared or lonely. We forget it. We forget that we come from this amazement,
We
you
forget
know,
it.
of God.
We get in this wheel of, we got to go to work, we got to get up, we got to go do this, we got to make money because we need to build a house, and we got to have a car, we got to pay our insurance, we got to
Hmm.
bills, we got this.
Details, details, details.
And then, so many people, they come home and they're exhausted, and they eat and they turn on the television. I haven't had a television, which is another great thing, since 1980.
That's a long time. That's a really long time.
That's
Well,
when I moved to Asheville. I left the film and television industry. Of course, then I
wow.
a
And
costume shop in
having
Asheville.
worked into it and then left it behind, that's a big switch.
Oh yeah.
What did your brother make of all this? Was he
My
in
brother
any way
never wanted to
supportive?
know anything, but I found his adoption papers and I told him. And so then after I was searching for a long time, his wife got real interested in it and did get a DNA test, and he tracked it down, and sure enough, he found a brother whose father wasn't really their father, it was their uncle. And I mean, it was another whole can of worms that opened up. But he's got a story too, but
Mhm.
he just doesn't. I think he's closer to his sister now than his other sister, his real sister, than he is
Did you
me.
have this? Did you have the same birth parents or different? I don't remember. Did you
No,
have different birth parents? Completely different, right?
we are completely different.
Hmm.
His whole family is completely different than me. I'm the weirdo, I was called, when this movie came out, this Barbie thing, which I didn't see till after everybody was telling me, I'm the weird Barbie,
Be the weird Barbie. I'm the weird Barbie.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
we're both the weird Barbie.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah,
I have
I
a
got
beautiful
really
friend who
weirded
is
out
Barbie. So,
when I did my first DNA test. I so wanted to find out who I was. And so I a friend talked me into getting one with the National Geographic Geno test. So I did that. They don't even do it anymore, and you're not able to access your records. Although I have my original records that I got. So I get this back, and there's no matches at all. But I
No
did
matches
find
at
that
all.
nothing.
Zero.
Oh, yeah, my story is really weird. So, but I did find out from National Geographic that I have one of the highest percentages of Denisovan DNA. And I'm like, Denisovan? What is that? And so I opened it. Googled for it, and it said, meet the strangest hybrid humanoid in history. And I'm like,
Oh, thank you, you said.
oh God, now I understand. Oh, geez, I'm an alien, of course. And of course, then I got further and I got into like, oh, I'm O negative blood, and found out that that's the only blood they're not able to clone. They don't know where it comes from. And I'm like, oh, I
Oh,
went
it
down
just got
that,
deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper.
yep, I went
So
down
you were
that
just buried in
rabbit
all
hole
these details,
over
every rabbit hole.
for
You
over a
really,
year.
you
I
know, they
went
say
down.
leave no stone unturned. You really left no stone unturned.
Right.
And it sounds like you want to keep for the book, for readers of the book, about meeting your mom. You don't want to talk
Oh,
about
no,
that.
I'll tell you. I'll tell you.
You
I'll
don't
tell
have to. You don't have
you. I
to.
took 3 DNA tests and I still had nothing. I had closest thing I had was like a third cousin, and there was no way to match anything up. And my adoption papers that I found said I was referred to as infant Hansen. There was not one Hansen in
Mhm.
any of my DNA tests. So I'm really trying. I printed out everybody who was, anywhere, not a eighth cousin or something. I printed out all these things, reams of paper, which I hate to use. And this room I'm in, my friend came over and brought me banners and sticky tape these together. And then I had them on the table I'm on now, going all the way into the kitchen, into the living room, on the counters, down on the floor, into the dining room table. And you had to hopscotch to get around. And I got nowhere, absolutely nowhere. And I'm like, geez, so I would put it away for a while, and then and then my ancestry test, I had a different one. I did National Geographic, Ancestry, and 23andMe. And when Ancestry didn't give me anything, then I did 23andMe, which gave me a few more matches, but nothing. So this
What?
went on. I mean, I remember thinking, I'm not paying Ancestry every month over and over and over again. So I had a few days left before I would have to pay again. And I was up all night, all day, using everything I could to delve deep into it and try and find anything out. And then nothing. Then I let it all go for a while. I mean, this has been a process of, I'm maxed. I got to take a break from this. And
It's
so
been
it
years,
took years
literally years.
from when I was in my 20s to 20, 34. How old am I? 50? It took like 45 years.
Mhm.
Unbelievable. In the
Mhm.
beginnings, it was newspaper articles, and there wasn't Google, there wasn't
But you didn't give
computers.
up. You
You didn't
never
have
give,
cell
you
phones.
never, here's
No, I
the weird
never gave
thing.
up.
This is a weird thing to me. Speaking of
What?
weird, Barbie,
Yeah.
your parents that raised you thought that it wouldn't matter. So they did not even tell you what they knew. And yet to you, it mattered so deeply that you spent basically your entire adult life on
Yeah.
this search. While you did other things, while you did other exciting things, but you never let go of this search. You absolutely had to know who you were, and you wouldn't give up no matter what happened. So the contrast between their idea that this was something trivial and your very deep feeling that this was absolutely essential was completely in opposition, diametric opposition.
Well, you know, when before they passed away, I had to let it go. I didn't want to hurt them. And that's true of most adoptees. You don't want to hurt your adoptee parents, you know, you feel like, oh, well, I owe my life to them type of shit. And so
Mhm.
that's a trauma in itself because you're, you know, you
You feel it, but you don't want to say it.
retrospect, you know, what's the difference of when slaves started and they would take the kids on trains and put them up on a stump and you'd bid on them? What's the difference that and people today spending thousands of dollars looking for a certain type of baby with blonde hair and blue eyes and or such and such a blood, and they'll pay more for this baby? That what's the fucking difference? It just breaks my heart to think about it. And now, I mean, there's been so many lies. I mean, sex is a big thing, sex and money. And that's what adoption's about.
You
Is
know, I'm, well, it's a thing for me because the slavery is a whole hardship and horror. It's like having a parents of the Holocaust. You just can't do it. It's too horrific to make a comparison. So for me, that's that. But I get the point you're making, which is that the person, the human being underneath. I mean, you have blonde hair. You know, you were the desirable one to your parents. They wanted a baby like you. They wanted you to be the way you looked,
why
you
they
know.
were Jewish. Why would they want a blonde haired, blue eyed? They were in demand. That was the thing.
Is that what it was?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
blonde hair, blue eyes were in demand.
Mhm. It's in some ways almost unfathomable. It's almost unfathomable.
You
Did you
know,
feel
I don't know if it's worse that way or with late discovery. I mean, now that all these tests are available, oh my God, 40% of the population knows somebody in the adoptee tribe is, you know, and then there's this whole group that's all of a sudden, you know, finding out their father isn't their father.
Mhm. It's
Oh
very
my
shocking.
God.
Well, how did your life change when you figured out that biological?
Oh, tremendously. It was like, first of all, I won. I won. I found out. At least I found out a lot of it.
You
I didn't
won.
find out
You
all
can
of it,
stop
but
looking.
I could, no, I still haven't stopped looking because there's
Yeah.
that, you know, I mean, I feel like satisfied. I'm satisfied at this point. And so, yeah, it was shocking to me. Uh, I finally found, I got a, my, who's a dear friend now, her name is Mary, and she was in Texas, and I went to an adoption congress in Atlanta and met her there. She let me stay in her room because there was no rooms, and we stayed up all night and became friends, and she's a search angel. And she goes, but I only do searches in Texas. That's what I know. But when we split, she said, I'm gonna help you. And she did. And so her and then DNA detectives, they got in trying to do it, and they had stumbling blocks and hired a detective. They knew somebody who was a detective and tried them, and they couldn't get anywhere. And it was just like one ridiculous thing after another. And she says, and your father's even harder to find. Well, one of the
Mhm.
reasons he was harder to find, it turns out that he was adopted. So any name that matched up with DNA wouldn't have worked, right? And so I finally
Such
my
a thing.
you know, I built a whole tree with Mary's help. She built a tree and stuff on Ancestry, and you know, once you get that up, then other links start coming in, and then we thought we found somebody, and that wasn't right, and somebody else, and then none of them panned out, and then all of a sudden I got a first cousin. If you get a first cousin on a match, you got it. So from there, it's funny because this person had tested because she wanted to know who her grandmother was. Well,
Wow.
most people understand that are into genealogy that if you're adopted and you get a first cousin, they could very well be your sibling, your half sibling, because there's that have. And so, yeah, and it's another whole long story of how I finally made contact. I mean,
And
I
and
was
it's in
fortunate
the
during
book.
that time.
I hate to have to stop now. We are
Oh,
stopping. We are stopping with a cliffhanger
oh
for
God.
everyone. Could it be any better, Valerie? This is a cliffhanger. The answer's in the book.
Oh my God. I will give you this much that I did get to finally meet her and agreeing with her that I would be a secret to the family. And months later, she threw a party so I could see my siblings, and I posed as a photographer.
Oh, you posed as a
Oh,
photographer, not as yourself.
Right. They had
Oh,
no idea who I was.
well,
So
I love you
there's
dearly.
much
I love you
more
dearly,
after that.
Valerie.
We could
Your
talk
book,
forever. I'll
your
shut up.
book is wonderful. I love you dearly, and I'm so grateful to you for being so open, so vulnerable, so real, so honest, so authentic, not only with me and this audience in this hour, but in this tremendous, I mean, really tremendous, great read of a book.
I would love
So
all
thank
adoptees
you.
to write their story. It is so
Write your
healing.
story. That's
Write
right.
your story. Please write your
Write
story.
your story. It heals you so deeply in ways nothing else, nothing else. And Becky, I hope you're not impatient with us because we have started to go over time.
no, no, it's wonderful. I love it. I wish we could go on all afternoon. I did plop Valerie's website into the chat, so feel free to visit that to order her book. I know I will be doing that because I want to know more. I want to read it.
And you can hear part of the audiobook on there and part of story songs. I'm doing a whole album of songs about the journey because I'm a
Wow.
singer and songwriter.
That is amazing. Thank you so much, Valerie, for sharing of yourself today, and Kiesa for bringing us this wonderful conversation today. And thank you all so much for joining us. I'm going to stop the recording.